Jae-sung lived a simple life on his farm, far away from the big cities and spaceports. Every day, he woke up early to feed the chickens and pigs. He spent long hours in the fields, planting and picking crops under the warm sun. It was hard work, but he enjoyed the peace and quiet of the countryside. Jae-sung knew there was a war going on between Earth and an alien race called the Kazans, but it all seemed very far away from his little farm. He didn't have a TV or computer, so he only heard bits and pieces of news when he went into town to sell his vegetables. From what he gathered, the Kazans looked like big cats, sort of a mix between a leopard and a person. They came from another star system and had tried to take over Earth years ago. The humans fought back, and the war had been going on ever since, but nobody seemed to be winning. Jae-sung thought it was a shame they couldn't just talk and get along. One night, Jae-sung was awakened by a loud boom, like thunder, but closer. The ground shook and his dog started barking like crazy. He got out of bed and looked out the window, but couldn't see anything in the dark. In the morning, he would have to check the fields for damage. Storms were rare this time of year. After a fitful night's sleep, Jae-sung went out at dawn to survey the farm. He found a long gouge carved into the dirt in the north field, like a giant plow had gone wild. At the end of the gash was a smoking lump of twisted metal that he didn't recognize. It looked like no farming equipment he'd ever seen. As he got closer, he realized it was some kind of aircraft, a spaceship, and it had crashed on his farm. Jae-sung's hands shook as he circled the wreckage, afraid of what he might find. He spotted a piece of the ship's hull that had broken open. Through the jagged hole, he glimpsed a dark shape lying very still. It looked like a body, but not a human one. He crept closer and peered inside. Amidst the crumpled metal and sparking wires lay a creature covered in spotted tan fur. Pointed ears, a cat-like face, a long tail. Jae-sung realized with a shock he was looking at a Kazan, one of the aliens from the war. The Kazan's eyes were closed, and it wasn't moving. Dark purplish blood matted the fur on its side. Jae-sung didn't know if it was alive or dead. He backed away from the ship, his mind racing. What should he do? He'd never seen an alien in person before. If anyone found out there was a Kazan on his farm, there would be trouble for sure. But he couldn't just leave it there, could he? Even if it was an enemy soldier, it needed help. And what if it was still alive? Jae-sung took a deep breath, trying to calm his nerves. He was just a farmer, not a soldier or a doctor. But he had to do something. Jae-sung stood frozen by the wrecked spaceship, his heart pounding. Part of him wanted to run back to the farmhouse and pretend he'd never seen the alien creature. But he knew he couldn't do that. He had to find out if it was still alive. Hands shaking, he crept closer to the jagged hole in the ship's side. He crouched down and peered in at the still form of the Kazan soldier. Its spotted fur was so strange and exotic to his eyes. He jumped when he saw its chest rise and fall slightly. It was breathing. Jae-sung's mind raced. The alien was badly injured and unconscious, but not dead. He couldn't just leave it here to die slowly. What if their roles were reversed and he had crashed on the Kazan homeworld? He would want someone to help him. He made up his mind. Enemy or not, he had to do what was right. He fetched an old canvas tarp from the barn and a medical kit. As carefully as he could, he reached into the ship and pulled the limp, heavy body of the Kazan out. Up close, he marveled at the alien's features. The feline shape of its head, the tawny color of its pelt, the thick tail and sharp claws. He had never seen anything like it. Jae-sung laid the Kazan out on the tarp, trying not to jostle its wounds. Dark purplish blood oozed from a deep gash in its side, and its breathing was shallow. Jae-sung wasn't a veterinarian, let alone a doctor for aliens, but he would do his best. He tore open the medical kit and pulled out gauze, antiseptic, painkillers, anything he thought might help. With shaking hands, he cleaned the wound as best he could and wrapped a bandage tightly around the Kazan's middle. He had no idea if human medicine would even work on its body. The Kazan didn't stir through any of this, which worried Jae-sung. He checked its pulse, which seemed steady if slow. Its skin felt surprisingly soft and warm, almost feverish. Jae-sung dumped out his canteen over the alien's face, hoping the water might revive it. But the Kazan remained unconscious. Nervous, but unable to do more, he dragged the tarp with the Kazan on it back to the farmhouse. It took all his strength to lift the soldier into the bed of his rusty pickup truck. He threw a ratty blanket over it to hide it from view, his mind spinning with the risk he was taking. If anyone saw him with the alien, if the Kazan woke up and attacked him. But no, he was committed now. He would take the wounded creature back to the farmhouse and look after it there, for better or worse. Maybe, he hoped desperately, it would be grateful to him for saving its life, and there wouldn't be any trouble. He climbed into the driver's seat, sweat trickling down his back. He felt like he was in a crazy dream. With a last anxious look at the bulky, blanket-shrouded shape in the back, he started the engine. The truck bounced and clattered down the dirt road towards the farmhouse, carrying the unlikeliest of passengers, a human farmer and a Leopard alien soldier. The sun was getting high in the sky by the time Jae-sung got the alien soldier settled in the farmhouse. He had carried it inside as gently as he could and laid it out on his own bed. The Kazan was heavy and awkward to move, but Jae-sung managed. He stepped back, breathing hard, and looked at the creature lying there. In the light of day, he could see it more clearly. It wore some kind of ripped uniform, all in shades of black and gray. Tufts of spotted fur poked out through the tears, strange boots with curved claws at the toes, a belt with pouches and a large pistol in a holster. Jae-sung reached out hesitantly to touch one pointed ear. It was soft and silky, like a cat's. He let out a shaky breath. This was all so unreal. What was he going to do with an alien in the house? What if it woke up angry? He didn't even speak its language. As he watched, the Kazan stirred and let out a low groan. Jae-sung froze. Slowly, the alien's eyes blinked open. They were large and amber-colored, with slit pupils like a feline. They focused blearily on Jae-sung. Jae-sung held very still, hardly daring to breathe. He held up his empty hands to show he meant no harm. "Hello," he said softly. "You're safe. I want to help." The Kazan stared at him. Its ears went back, and it made a hissing sound, trying to sit up. Immediately it fell back with a pained growl, clutching at its side. Fresh blood spotting through the bandage. "Careful," Jae-sung said. "You're hurt bad. Don't move." He had no idea if the alien understood him. Slowly, telegraphing his movements, he reached for the medical kit again. The Kazan watched him suspiciously, but didn't attack. Jae-sung held up the antiseptic and fresh gauze. He pointed to the alien's wound, then mind rewrapping it. "I need to change this," he said. "It will help." "Okay." The soldier hesitated, then let out a rattling sigh and laid back. It seemed to understand, or at least be too weak to fight. Jae-sung took that as permission. Trying to keep his hands from shaking, he peeled back the old bandage as carefully as he could. The gash looked angry and raw. He hoped it wasn't getting infected. Did aliens get infections? He used a cotton pad to dab on more antiseptic. The Kazan flinched and made a low yowling noise but held still. "Sorry," Jae-sung murmured. "I know it hurts." He wrapped clean gauze around the thick, furry torso, trying to be gentle. He could feel the alien watching him the whole time. He wondered what it thought of him, if it was grateful or just wary. Job done, he sat back, wrapping his arms around himself. The Kazan blinked slowly at him. It made a grudging humming sound. Then its eyes slicked shut again. Asleep or unconscious, Jae-sung wasn't sure. He let out a long breath and rubbed his face. He had done all he could for now. He needed to figure out what to do next. How long could he hide an alien in the farmhouse? What would it do when it recovered? What did it even eat? He would take things one step at a time. Food and rest would help the soldier heal. He would find a way to communicate with it somehow. Maybe, just maybe, he could avoid any trouble until the alien was well enough to leave. And maybe by then, it would see that not all humans were enemies. Over the next few days, Jae-sung fell into a strange new routine. He went about his normal farm chores, but now he had a secret responsibility, caring for the alien soldier hidden away in the farmhouse. The Kazan slept a lot at first, which was probably a good thing. Its body needed rest to heal. Jae-sung checked on it often, changing the bandages and making sure it was comfortable. He began to think of the alien as he rather than it. It just seemed right, though he wasn't completely sure about Kazan biology or gender. When the soldier was awake, they tried to communicate. It wasn't easy. The alien didn't seem to know any human languages, and Jae-sung certainly didn't speak Kazan. They relied on a lot of gesturing and guesswork. Jae-sung pointed to his chest and said his name slowly and clearly, Jae-sung. Then he pointed to the Kazan, raising his eyebrows in a question. The soldier made a choking, growling sound that might have been a word in his language. It sounded like Kashraz. Jae-sung tried to repeat it. Kashraz. He pointed to the alien. The Kazan nodded, looking almost amused at Jae-sung's poor pronunciation. Well, at least they knew each other's names now, more or less. Jae-sung wondered often about what had brought Kashraz to Earth and what had caused his ship to crash. But those weren't exactly easy concepts to act out. The alien didn't volunteer any information either. Food was another challenge. Jae-sung had no idea what Kazans ate. He tried offering Kashraz various things from his own meals: rice, vegetables, eggs, even meat, although he wasn't sure if Kazans were predators or not. The soldier sniffed suspiciously at everything and only nibbled a bit here and there. He seemed particularly interested in the chicken meat, but then turned his nose up at it. Jae-sung accidentally figured out the problem when he burned his hand on a hot pan and let out a yell. Kashraz's ears pricked up at the sound of sizzling meat, and he made an eager rumbling noise. Of course, Kazans were probably used to eating their food raw, or at least not cooked through like humans did. Jae-sung felt a bit silly for not realizing sooner. From then on, he served the soldier only very rare meat, which was greeted with much more enthusiasm. Gradually, Kashraz grew stronger. He could sit up on his own and even take a few steps around the bedroom, leaning on the walls for support. Jae-sung knew it would only be a matter of time before the alien was well enough to leave. Part of him was relieved at the idea. Hiding Kashraz was nerve-wracking, and he feared what would happen if they were discovered. But another part of him had grown used to the alien's presence, odd as it was. He would almost miss their strange wordless conversations and the noises of another living being in the usually empty farmhouse. Late one night, Jae-sung was startled awake by crashing sounds. He ran to Kashraz's room and found the Kazan collapsed on the floor, breathing hard. He had clearly tried to go further than his healing body was ready for. As Jae-sung helped him back to the bed, Kashraz gripped his arm. He made intense eye contact and pointed toward the window, where the wreck of his ship still lay in the fields. He hit his own chest and mimed what looked like a small explosion, then pointed at his eyes and around the room. Was he trying to explain about his crash? Warning that someone would come looking for him? Asking Jae-sung to hide evidence of his presence? There was an urgency in his gaze that made Jae-sung's stomach twist with nerves. He didn't fully understand, but he got the sense that Kashraz feared discovery for both their sakes. Their odd partnership, this sheltering of an enemy, was growing more complicated by the day. And Jae-sung suspected the biggest challenges were yet to come. Jae-sung couldn't get Kashraz's warning out of his head. The alien seemed convinced that someone would come looking for him, and that it would be bad for both of them if he was found here. The next day, Jae-sung drove his truck out to the crash site. The wreckage of Kashraz's ship still lay in the field, a glaring sign that something was amiss. He needed to hide it, but how? He had an idea. The farm had an old, unused barn at the far edge of the property. It was half falling down, and Jae-sung mostly used it to store broken equipment he hoped to fix one day. If he could just get the ship pieces into the barn, they would be out of sight. It took him most of the day, and a lot of sweat and swearing, to load the ship parts into his truck and ferry them over to the barn. The pieces were surprisingly light for their size, but still awkward to handle. He ended up having to break some of them down further. By sunset, the field looked more or less normal again, and the barn doors were shut tight on the alien craft. Jae-sung was exhausted and filthy, but satisfied. Hopefully that would be enough to avoid any prying eyes. When he got back to the farmhouse, he found Koshraz pacing around the bedroom anxiously. The Kazan's ears perked up as Jae-sung entered, and he made an inquisitive trilling sound. Jae-sung minded driving the truck and carrying things, then gave a big thumbs up. "It's taken care of," he said, hoping his tone conveyed the message. "Your ship is hidden now." Some of the tension seemed to drain out of Koshraz's posture. He sank down to sit on the edge of the bed, nodding slowly. He pointed to Jae-sung, then put his hand over his own chest and bowed his head in an unmistakable gesture of gratitude. Jae-sung found himself smiling. "You're welcome," he said. It felt good to know he had eased his guest's worries. Guest, not prisoner. That was how he had started to think of Koshraz. The Kazan surprised him then by patting the bed next to him, clearly inviting Jae-sung to sit. When he did so, Koshraz started pointing at himself and making a series of growls, hisses, and purr-like sounds. It took Jae-sung a moment to realize he was trying to teach him words in his language. Delighted, Jae-sung did his best to repeat the alien sounds. Koshraz shook his head and corrected his pronunciation, and they both ended up laughing at Jae-sung's clumsy attempts. They passed the evening like that, trading words and phrases back and forth. Jae-sung learned that Krisha meant something like thank you, and Koran was friend. Koshraz seemed particularly pleased when Jae-sung used that one. For his part, Jae-sung tried to teach Koshraz some basic Korean. The Kazan struggled with the unfamiliar sounds just as much as Jae-sung did with his, but they were both determined. By the time the stars were out, they had made decent progress. It struck Jae-sung as he got ready for bed that night. He had just spent hours trying to learn the language of an enemy alien, and it had been fun. More than that, it had felt natural, easy in a way that little else in his life did. When was the last time he had laughed so much? He didn't know what the future held for him and Koshraz, but he did know that his life would never be the same. The alien soldier had brought danger and uncertainty, yes, but also companionship and new understanding. As he drifted off to sleep, Jae-sung found himself hoping that Koran was more than just a language lesson between them. He hoped it was a sign of things to come. Jae-sung couldn't get Koshraz's warning out of his head. The alien seemed convinced that someone would come looking for him, and that it would be bad for both of them if he was found here. The next day, Jae-sung drove his truck out to the crash site. The wreckage of Koshraz's ship still lay in the field, a glaring sign that something was amiss. He needed to hide it, but how? He had an idea. The farm had an old, unused barn at the far edge of the property. It was half falling down, and Jae-sung mostly used it to store broken equipment he hoped to fix one day. If he could just get the ship pieces into the barn, they would be out of sight. It took him most of the day, and a lot of sweat and swearing, to load the ship parts into his truck and ferry them over to the barn. The pieces were surprisingly light for their size, but still awkward to handle. He ended up having to break some of them down further. By sunset, the field looked more or less normal again, and the barn doors were shut tight on the alien craft. Jae-sung was exhausted and filthy, but satisfied. Hopefully that would be enough to avoid any prying eyes. When he got back to the farmhouse, he found Koshraz pacing around the bedroom anxiously. The Kazan's ears perked up as Jae-sung entered, and he made an inquisitive trilling sound. Jae-sung minded driving the truck and carrying things, then gave a big thumbs up. "It's taken care of," he said, hoping his tone conveyed the message. "Your ship is hidden now." Some of the tension seemed to drain out of Khosrow's posture. He sank down to sit on the edge of the bed, nodding slowly. He pointed to Jae-sung, then put his hand over his own chest and bowed his head in an unmistakable gesture of gratitude. Jae-sung found himself smiling. "You're welcome," he said. It felt good to know he had eased his guest's worries. Guest, not prisoner. That was how he had started to think of Khosrow. The Kazan surprised him then by patting the bed next to him, clearly inviting Jae-sung to sit. When he did so, Khosrow started pointing at himself and making a series of growls, hisses, and purr-like sounds. It took Jae-sung a moment to realize. He was trying to teach him words in his language. Delighted, Jae-sung did his best to repeat the alien sounds. Khosrow shook his head and corrected his pronunciation, and they both ended up laughing at Jae-sung's clumsy attempts. They passed the evening like that, trading words and phrases back and forth. Jae-sung learned that Krisha meant something like thank you, and Koran was friend. Khosrow seemed particularly pleased when Jae-sung used that one. For his part, Jae-sung tried to teach Khosrow some basic Korean. The Kazan struggled with the unfamiliar sounds just as much as Jae-sung did with his, but they were both determined. By the time the stars were out, they had made decent progress. It struck Jae-sung as he got ready for bed that night. He had just spent hours trying to learn the language of an enemy alien, and it had been fun. More than that, it had felt natural, easy in a way that little else in his life did. When was the last time he had laughed so much? He didn't know what the future held for him and Khosrow, but he did know that his life would never be the same. The alien soldier had brought danger and uncertainty, yes, but also companionship and new understanding. As he drifted off to sleep, Jae-sung found himself hoping that Koran was more than just a language lesson between them. He hoped it was a sign of things to come. The day had come for Khosrow to leave the farm. He was almost fully healed now, and he knew he needed to return to his people. He and Jae-sung had a mission, to spread the word that peace was possible between their kinds. Jae-sung helped Khosrow gather supplies for his journey. They packed food, water, and a few items of clothing that Jae-sung had altered to fit the Kazan's body. Khosrow had also spent time repairing his communications device, which had been damaged in the crash. As they worked, they went over their plan. Khosrow would return to the Kazan ship that was orbiting Earth and report what had happened to him. He would tell his commanders about Jae-sung's kindness and argue for a peaceful approach to the humans. Jae-sung, for his part, would try to get in touch with human authorities. He would tell them his story and urge them to consider the possibility of negotiations with the Kazans. It was a daunting task for a simple farmer, but he was determined to try. They loaded Khosrow's repaired escape pod onto Jae-sung's truck and drove out to a remote part of the farm. They had chosen a spot far from prying eyes for the launch. As Jae-sung helped Khosrow into the pod, he felt a lump in his throat. The Kazan paused, looking at him with those amber eyes that Jae-sung had come to know so well. "Jae-sung," Khosrow said, his Korean now fluent, "I will never forget what you have done for me. You have changed everything." Jae-sung managed to smile. "You've changed everything for me too. I'll miss you, my friend." Khosrow placed a clawed hand on Jae-sung's shoulder. "We will see each other again. I believe that. We have work to do, but when it is done, I will come back." Jae-sung nodded, not trusting himself to speak. He stepped back as Khosrow sealed the pod. The engines hummed to life, then roared as the small craft lifted off the ground. Jae-sung watched until the pod was just a speck in the sky, then a distant star among many. He stood there for a long time, thinking about all that had happened and all that was yet to come. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of activity. Jae-sung reached out to everyone he could think of. Local officials, news outlets, even the military. Most didn't believe his story, but a few listened with interest. He told them everything. holding nothing back. He spoke of Khosrau's bravery, of the bond they had formed, of the potential for understanding between their peoples. Slowly, word began to spread. There were setbacks and challenges, of course. Some accused Jae-sung of being a traitor, of collaborating with the enemy. Others dismissed him as a crackpot. But he persevered, driven by his promise to Khosrau. And then, one day, news came from above. The Kazan ship had contacted Earth, requesting a meeting. They said they had a message from one of their scouts, a message of peace. Jae-sung's heart soared. Khosrau had done it. He had convinced his people to take a chance, just as Jae-sung had convinced some of his. It was just the beginning, Jae-sung knew. There would be negotiations, misunderstandings, maybe even more fighting. But it was a start, a fragile seed of hope planted by an unlikely friendship. As he looked up at the stars that night, Jae-sung allowed himself to dream. Of a future where Kazans and humans worked side by side. Of a universe where different kinds could learn from each other. And of a certain brave, kind-hearted alien who had crashed into his life and changed it forever. "Come back soon, Koran," Jae-sung whispered to the sky. "We have a new world to build together." Years passed, and the world changed in ways Jae-sung had never imagined. The meeting between the Kazans and humans had been a success, the first of many. Slowly, tentatively, the two races began to work together. It wasn't easy. There were misunderstandings, old hurts, and deep-rooted fears on both sides. But there were also acts of kindness, of bravery, of friendship. Little by little, the wall of hatred began to crumble. Jae-sung found himself at the center of this change. His story had spread, becoming a symbol of hope for those who dreamed of peace. He was invited to speak at gatherings, to meet with leaders from both worlds. It was a strange new role for a simple farmer, but he embraced it. Through it all, he thought of Khosrau. The Kazan soldier had become a leader in his own right, working tirelessly to promote understanding between their peoples. They spoke often, over vast distances of space, sharing their triumphs and their struggles. But they hadn't seen each other since that fateful day on the farm. Their duties kept them apart, even as their bond drew them together. Until one crisp autumn morning, when a familiar ship landed in Jae-sung's field. He ran out, heart pounding, as the door opened and a tall, spotted figure emerged. "Koran," Jae-sung breathed, the word catching in his throat. Khosrau smiled, a real wide smile that showed his fangs. "Jae-sung, I told you I would come back." They embraced, the farmer and the soldier, the human and the Kazan. They had both changed so much, but in that moment, they were just two friends, reunited at last. They walked through the fields, talking and laughing, remembering and dreaming. Khosrau marveled at the changes in the farm, the new crops and machines. Jae-sung drank in the sight of his friend, strong and healthy and here. As the sun began to set, they sat on the porch, just as they had so many times before. But now, there was no need to hide, no fear of discovery or betrayal. "We did it," Jae-sung said softly. "We changed things." Khosrau nodded. "You changed things. You changed me. I came here as a soldier, ready to fight and die. You showed me another way." Jae-sung shook his head. "We showed each other. And now, look at us. Look at the world." It was a world still healing, still learning. But it was also a world of possibility, of friendship across the stars. A world where a farmer and a soldier could sit side by side, watching the sunset. In the years to come, their story would be told and retold. The tale of an unlikely friendship, a crash landing, and a shared dream. Children of both races would learn of Jae-sung and Khosrau, the heroes who had brought peace. But in that moment, they were just two friends, enjoying each other's company. Two beings who had found, in the most unexpected of places, a bond that had changed the universe. As the stars came out, Jae-sung raised a glass. "To peace," he said. Khosrau raised his own. "To friendship." They clinked their glasses, the human and the Kazan, and drank to a future that they had made possible, a future of understanding, of unity, of hope. And above them, the stars shone down on a world made brighter by their light. The end.